It began in the dead of night, June 17, 1972. 5 men in suits and surgical gloves crept into the Watergate office complex in Washington, D.C. They carried burglary tools, cameras, and wiretaps. Their target, the Democratic National Committee headquarters. They weren't common thieves. They were linked to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign. This wasn't just a burglary. It was the opening act in a conspiracy that would expose corruption, abuse of power, and bring down the most powerful man in the world. To understand Watergate, we have to understand the America of the early 1970s. The Vietnam War was raging. Anti-war protests filled the streets. Trust in government was already crumbling, fueled by the Pentagon Papers, which revealed decades of government lies about Vietnam. The civil rights movement was still shaking the nation. And Richard Nixon, who had clawed his way into the presidency in 1968, was obsessed with one thing: staying in power. Nixon saw enemies everywhere: the press, anti-war activists, civil rights leaders, even within his own government. This siege mentality would drive everything that followed. The 5 men caught inside the Watergate complex weren't just random criminals. James McCord, a former CIA officer hired by Nixon's campaign. Frank Sturgis, a veteran of the Bay of Pigs invasion. Eugenio Martinez, another anti-Castro operative. Bernard Barker, Cuban exile, known for his ties to U.S. intelligence. Virgilio Gonzalez, a locksmith with experience in covert operations. They called themselves the Plumbers because their job was to fix leaks. But in reality, they were Nixon's personal dirty tricks squad. Their mission at Watergate? Plant bugs on phones, copy confidential documents, gather dirt on Nixon's political opponents. This wasn't their first job. They had already broken into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office, trying to discredit the man who leaked the Pentagon Papers. The break-in was sloppy. Police caught the burglars red-handed, flashlights still on, lockpicks in hand. Within hours, Nixon's White House launched into damage control. The goal? Disconnect the president. Bury the story. Top aides H.R. Haldeman, John Ehrlichman, and John Dean coordinated hush money payments, bribes to keep the burglars silent. They leaned on the FBI, urging them to back off the investigation, citing national security. But one problem lingered. 2 reporters of the Washington Post were digging too deep. Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein were young reporters with something to prove. What began as a simple burglary case soon led them into the dark heart of political corruption. They followed the money trail. Checks written to the burglars traced directly to Nixon's campaign slush fund. At night, Woodward met his secret source, Deep Throat, in shadowy parking garages. Deep Throat's message was chilling. The truth is bigger than you think. Follow the money. As the scandal grew, Senate investigators uncovered something explosive. Nixon had installed a secret taping system in the Oval Office. Every conversation, every plot, every cover-up was caught on tape. Nixon fought tooth and nail to keep the tapes secret, claiming executive privilege. But the Supreme Court disagreed. They ruled unanimously. Nixon must hand over the tapes. When the tapes were finally heard, they exposed Nixon's direct role in the cover-up. On tape, Nixon ordered aides to tell the CIA to shut down the FBI investigation. It was clear Nixon wasn't just aware of Watergate, he was its mastermind. In 1973, the Senate Watergate Committee held live televised hearings, captivating millions of Americans. Witness after witness testified to the dirty tricks, the lies, and the abuse of power. Nixon's former counsel, John Dean, delivered the most damning testimony. He told the committee, "There's a cancer growing on the presidency." It was the first time in history Americans saw, in real time, the downfall of their president. As investigators closed in, Nixon became more desperate. On October 20th, 1973, Nixon ordered Attorney General Elliot Richardson to fire the special prosecutor investigating Watergate. Richardson refused and resigned. His deputy also refused and resigned. Finally, the third-ranking official carried out the order. It became known as the Saturday Night Massacre, a constitutional crisis that shocked the nation. By mid-1974, Nixon's presidency was collapsing. The House Judiciary Committee approved articles of impeachment, obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. With no political allies left, Nixon realized his fate was sealed. On August 8, 1974, Richard Nixon addressed the nation. The next day, he boarded Marine One, waved goodbye, and left the White House for the final time. Nixon's resignation left the nation stunned. His successor, Gerald Ford, took office and soon granted Nixon a full pardon, arguing the country needed to move on. But the scars of Watergate never fully healed. Trust in government hit historic lows. New laws were passed on campaign finance. Oversight of intelligence agencies was tightened, and Americans learned a painful truth. Even the president is not above the law. Watergate was more than a scandal. It was a warning, a reminder that democracy survives only if those in power are held accountable. If you enjoyed this story and want more deep dives into history's biggest scandals, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.